Perry here at Bad Boy Guitars again. We're working with Tommy Gibbons' neck today. We're going to put a truss rod slot in. This is the tool I use. What I've done is I've centered out my neck so that I do know that it's running center on this, and it's going to cut a line right down the center of my neck. On the side of my neck, well, actually I've taken and marked out my neck where my neck's going to be. Here's my neck. I know where my stopping points are. They're right here. There's one, and down here's the other, right there. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the groove in there for that truss rod to drop in. The truss rod is quarter inch wide, and what that'll do is it'll drop right down into the groove that we're going to do. What I did was I set my bit to the height of my truss rod, is what I did. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this bad boy down this thing, and what we'll do is we'll lift it up, let it drop down onto it, and then follow it down to our stopping point down at the other point. And then I'll drag it back through again, and that'll allow us to have our truss rod slot. So I'll get started on this. Okay, we got the slot put in there right now. As you can see, this thing will fit right into this, except the tip here. This piece right here is a little tad wider, so I usually mark this, and then I'll take one of my really sharp chisels and go on along the edges of this so it'll drop down in there. Once it's dropped in there, that's it. That's the beginning of our truss rod slot dropping in there. So off to the next thing. We'll get on to that. We've got a lot of stuff that came in for Tommy's guitar, and one of which his new tremolo's in. So I've done a bunch of layouts here, but his new tremolo's in. So we're going to be showing you how to drop this pocket in here for this, why we're at this point on the body for this trem. His new lockdown came in for the neck, so we're going to be cutting a pocket in right here. Now this pocket will be cut at an angle. I'm using a Kahler trem. I work with Gary Kahler a lot. I use all of his trims on my guitars. So Kahler trem, and the reason you have to put a angle pocket in here is because of the height of the tremolo will set. You want that height to go up at an angle so that you have adjustment on all your rollers. You want to have adjustments for that. So if you don't, you won't have any adjustment. You won't be able to lower it, or you could obviously raise it, but you will not be able to lower it any further than the neck would allow you to do. So Fender, you can get away with that. If you're using a standard Fender trim, you can get away with running a flat pocket in there. That's fine. But for this style tremolo, we definitely have to put an angled pocket in there. So I just made the template for that. We will get to that here in a little bit, and show you how we do all the pockets for this, for the pickups, and for the trem, and we'll get on to that. That way, once we get up to that point and we get all the pockets done, then it's a matter of doing my finish up sanding on this thing, and then off to the spray booth. We get this thing going for its first coat of finish. Alright, I've gone ahead and got my truss rod in here, as we can see. I also marked my angle, and as you can see, I went ahead and cut the angle And on the top here, I laid out my headstock as to what I wanted. And then I went ahead and laid out where all my tuners are going to go. Now's the time to do a lot of that stuff. Get it out of the way, mark it so you know where they're at. That way if you sand or anything like that, I usually take an awl and punch the holes down in there a little ways, and that way I know where all my tuners are going to go. So this thing now has its angle put on it, and obviously we need to make this neck the thickness that we need it. And as you can see, I marked on here a few places as to the thickness of the neck. That's the thickness of the neck all the way down. So what we're going to do, there's several ways you can do this. I mean, everybody does it differently. I tend to use my table saw, and it'll allow me to cut down to here, and then I'll go ahead and cut in with my bandsaw, and that'll give me my thickness of what I need here for my neck. If you do this, please make sure that you are square, because if you don't get it square and you go to lay it in the pocket of the guitar, the neck's going to be tilted in there one way or the other, and you don't want that happening. So you need to make sure that when you do cut this and you do lay it out, that is square. So we're up to this point. Let's go over here. This is the jig. I make my own jigs for my pockets for cutting in my neck, because they're angled, and because they're angled, I make my own jigs. As you can see, it's angled. So that way when I lay it out on here, and once again, everything is set off of center on this body. Once this pocket is cut, it's cut. So if you get it off a little bit, I mean, you can correct yourself, but cut this pocket first. And then once you do that, we'll fit the neck into this, and then we can lay straight edges down each side of the neck, and we can find center again. I always do that simply because you are human, and humans err. So machines do not, humans do. So I say that, but machines are made by humans. So anyway, that's the jig I made, and you can make this way. Other guys do it different. I do it this way. It's just the way I do it. It doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just the way I do it. So anyway, we're set up to do that. I'll affix this to the body so that I can run my router through here, and we'll route that pocket and get that out of the way too. We have the jig that I made for the pocket. Once again, this is an angled pocket. Like you can see, it's angled. And what this does will allow me to put that Kahler in there and have adjustment on it. So what we're going to do, we're going to route this out, and we're going to go all the way down to this mark here and follow it through with the router. So I'm going to go ahead and get that started, get her done, and then we'll go on to the next. We got this routed in. It is at an angle, and it doesn't take too much. Take a little bit at a time and work it. And what I used was a bit like this. It's got a bearing at the top, and just take a little bit at a time, do your adjustments. But as you can see, nice pocket, and let's see how good that pocket is. So I take my jig, and there you go. Nice fit. Okay, this is a template for my neck. That's my template. So now I know that my neck's going to fit nice into that pocket. So this thing as you can see, has a center line on it, and we're hitting right on center line. That's what we want. Now the rest of this thing will go fairly easy as long as that center line stays center. So what we're going to do, we will take, and when we drop this in, we'll run a straight edge down each side of this and mark it down the body, and then we can measure to make sure we're exact center line with the neck. So okay, here we are. We got the layout. Here's the layout for the trim and for the pockets for the pickups. And what we need to do now is lay our jigs on there. For that, there's the jig for the pickup pockets, and obviously I have to make a jig for the tremolo. I had a pattern that I made. That gave me my pattern. I went ahead and made the pattern, so I knew where the layout was on it. So once I got my layouts done, I could do that. Talk a little bit about pickups here real quick. There's two different types of pickups. The front pickup usually is what they call a regular space. Depending on the spread in the back, you can put a regular space pickup back here, or what they call it F space. What that means is the magnets are spread, because these strings, as they go down the neck here, they spread wider, obviously. So when they get towards the rear, if the magnets are just a little bit wider, they hit right directly onto the magnets. Now that's an option that you can always go for. Don't have to. The pickup will still work, and it'll still work fine. So that's one of the things that you can also think about as you're doing a build. So also the space, that the measurement from the 12th fret down to your bridge is the same length from your nut to your 12th fret. So if you measure from your nut to your 12th fret, that same length, you take and turn around and put 12th fret to your bridge. That is the exact length. You have to do that. If you do not, this guitar will never be right. You will never set the intonation in it right, and you'll be playing it trying to figure out, why does this thing not sound right? And that would be why. That has to be right on. So just make sure, once again, the length from the nut to the 12th fret is the same length from the 12th fret to your bridge. And I usually go off my high E to set, and that way that'll give you, you can set your intonation. So always remember that. Do not forget that. If you forget that, you're never going to get this guitar right. So okay, off to the next step. Okay, there we go. We got the pockets done. The pockets are roughly a little over 1 inch. On my templates, when I put them on the top of the guitar to route them, I use double back tape. That's what holds them in place. And double back tape, great stuff. It's great stuff for in the shop, but I use it all the time. Not saying that you couldn't clamp it down, you can. Double back tape seems to really work well for me. That's what I use. So for any of this kind of stuff, when you're routing it, you can get around having clamps in your way, obviously, because this is all done by hand with the hand routers. Okay, here we are. We got the pocket done. All the rest of this stuff's done. Now we want to do is, everybody always asks me, how do you get all those wires all the way through that guitar? Well, method is, this is a bit, and it's a long drill bit. The first drill I do so that we can get wires from this pocket to this pocket, and this one in here, and this one in here, all the wires go into that one pocket. So what we do, take the drill bit and we start inside your cavity for your neck and drill that all the way through, and you can drill it all the way back into your back pocket and just go all the way through. And when that's done, then you want to drill a hole through here into the cavity of your electronics pocket, and that will get all your wires all into here. So I want to get that done, and then we're going to drill a hole for our plug, for our jack plug. We'll put that over here. I got it marked already. It's already marked. That's where we're going to drill through, get that, so that'll be done. And then we have to countersink for our neck screws. So we'll get the countersinks done on that. And the countersink bits that we use look like this. That's what we use. That's what I use to drill the plug pocket, and also countersink into the neck. I have one of these that I marked, so I know how deep to go on my drill press. Or you can set the depth on your drill press so that's as far as it goes, and you just drill it in and done. Got the holes drilled through, as you can see. Holes are drilled through. Back into this cavity here, there's a hole that goes in there. The hole goes down through here into the back cavity. Here we are, it comes in here. Okay, that's all of our holes are drilled. The only thing I need to do to this now is do this for the mounting of the neck. I gotta countersink those, and then this body will be ready for final sand and finish sand. And then it's going to head off into my spray booth. Okay, we have the holes put in here for the hold downs, neck hold downs. Everything's drilled. Everything is pocketed. We're ready for our final sand to clean this all up, get all our, now's the time to do it, get all the edges squared away, and make sure we got a nice flat areas, things like that, so that we're not doing a lot of sanding after we get the finish going on it. Get this thing sanded, then I tape off this pocket so when it goes into the booth we don't spray this. You don't want to spray this. Simply because if you put too much finish or something like that, you got to put your neck in and you go, oh, my neck doesn't fit now. Okay, I put the neck into my saw and I cut it down, as you can see. So this is the start of our neck. We got our truss rod in the slot in here. I went ahead and marked out for my tuners, everything else. Now we want to put our jig on here, and what we will do when the jig's on there now, we'll fix it. I'll take it to the band saw and I will cut this out, and then it goes to the router to clean up the edges. And after the edges are all cleaned up and we got this all done, we'll start sanding, get this thing sanded and get it prepped for the fretboard. But being that we are going to put binding on this around this top edge, we need to make sure that that's done. In fact, I even put on there to remind myself that I'm putting binding on this neck around the top of the headstock. So that has to go on there before I start putting my fretboard and all that stuff on. So off to the next step. All right, we went ahead and put the jig on there, took it to the bandsaw, cut everything out, and then put it over on the router table. I routed the edges down, and I figured while I was out doing all that, I'd go ahead and drill my tuner pegs. I put my fretboard on and get all that out of the way before I start profiling the back. That's just the way I do it. You do not have to do it that way, but that's the way I do it. So there you go. It's ready. It's ready for doing the next step. Let's talk about the binding. We're binding the top of this. So what I did on my table router, I have a bit in here that is for binding. And if you can see that the bearing is a little bit smaller than the blade. So when you run it around the top, it gives you this effect. So that's what I'm looking for. Right there. This is the binding right here. Binding's going to lay into that curb, and that's what the effect will be. You'll see. Now, to put this binding in here, you don't just, I mean, it gets glued fast, but to go around these corners and everything else, you would never get that stuff to bend. It's really, really tough. So, what you use a heat gun. Don't want to overheat the binding. It'll melt it and it'll burn it. You just want to heat it so that it'll bend into the curb, so that when you go to glue it, it's in. I always leave a little bit out the end if I can. That way when I nip it back and run the other piece into it, that it'll be a clean edge. So that's how that's done. I use glue, binding glue, and that's what holds it on there. Once you get that on there, then you can take sandpaper and clean it up, and make it so it, all the edges are nice and clean on it and stuff like that. So that's where we're at right now with this, and I'm going to get started with that and get that binding on there.